Once upon a time, smoking was cool and good for you, according to Adment and some of the physicians. It is almost impossible now to imagine a time when cigarette packets weren't plastered with trichotomies and rotten toes, and smoking was something you did in office, homes, restaurants, instead of a shameful act furtively executed in a plastic room at the airport or in a urine-scented gap between two wheeled bins, while passers-by stared at you in open disgust. Smoking used to be glamorous, and that was partly due to the magic of advertising. Tobacco might be a definite bad thing, but trying to persuade people to put a burning paper tube of dangerous acrid leaves in their mouth has led to some extraordinary feats of creativity. And you can see some of the products of these creative feats on your screen. The tobacco lobby, primarily composed of tobacco industry representatives, has a long history of using various strategies to influence public policy and undermine tobacco control efforts. This lobbying has involved direct engagement with policymakers, funding from groups, and creating campaigns to downplay the health risk of smoking. In the United States, from the 1950s until the 1990s, tobacco industries wielded great influence in shaping public opinion on the health risk of tobacco. Despite the efforts of public health advocates, scientists, and those affected by smoking, both Congress and courts favored the tobacco industry in policy and litigation. During early stages of tobacco wars between 1950s and 1960s, in response to growing scientific evidence linking smoking to disease, tobacco companies initially dismissed or downplayed the risks. They formed groups like the Tobacco Industry Research Committee and the Tobacco Institute to disseminate industry-funded research and to promote a narrative of uncertainty. Additionally, worried that these studies would negatively impact tobacco consumption, tobacco companies met together and hired a public relations firm called Hills and Knowlton. In 1954, tobacco companies published a joint press release called "Anne Frank Statement", which cast doubt on studies linking smoking and cancer and called for more research. Tobacco war tactics between 1970s and 1990s undermined research and public health initiatives. During the time when scientific evidence grew against smoking, the industry focused on undermining the credibility of research and public health initiatives. They funded independent researchers and organizations to promote the idea that more research was needed before definite conclusions could be drawn. The industry also used front groups to create an impression of public support for smokers' rights, often arguing against regulations that would protect public health. These groups often presented themselves as independent advocates for smokers' rights or small businesses, but their connections to the tobacco industry are often hidden. This lobbying was generally very successful, as the tobacco industry was well funded and southern states rallied on tobacco revenues. And finally, the tobacco wars tactics changed during 1990s and 2000s, changing to defending market share. With mounting evidence and public pressure, the industry shifted its focus to defending its market share and fighting against further regulations. They continued to use lobbying and public relations to influence policymakers and the public, often arguing that regulations would negatively impact the economy and job creation. This stage also saw emergence of the Master Settlement Agreement in 1998, which settled lawsuits with state attorneys general and included significant revenue payment to the states. But despite the Master Settlement Agreement, the industry continued to lobby against further restrictions, particularly on advertising and marketing. The tobacco industry has actively lobbied against plain packaging, arguing that it would harm small businesses and increase smuggling. And here we meet Nick Naylor. He is a fictional character from a novel written by Christopher Buckley, Thank You for Smoking. Nick is a tobacco industry lobbyist in the 1990s. Nick is a chief spokesman for an Academy of Tobacco Studies, which is a fictional representation of a real-life tobacco industry institute, Tobacco Institute, a lobbying firm advocating for benefits of smoking. He utilizes very questionable rhetoric tactics during high-profile media events in order to advocate for his clients' agenda. And Nick is waging a war against a crusade against tobacco industries, as his clients see it. Nick's name is a possible play on nicotine and coffin nails, and he is being paid to talk, and he talks smoothly. Nick comes out as a very efficient operator, and he is twisting and turning truth and playing his audience for fools. And while considerable number of readers might find him very unlikable and decide to hate him, I think equal number of readers might find Nick very fascinating, and I think I am one of these readers. And when you follow Nick's character and you see all his rhetoric tactics, you really want to study more of him. His skill and technique in turning and twisting facts around and just blurring this distinction between true and fantasy are absolutely masterful. In his technique, Nick is trying to avoid direct frontal attack on his opponents because he is fully aware that he is not on an equal ground in terms of facts and probably he will just lose an argument. Instead, he is twisting an argument and trying to usually come at the person, or alternatively, trying to absolutely divert the discussion and maybe shift the focus to something else. This book shows word twisting, message spinning, and many of other rhetoric tactics that are actually aiming not at discovering truth, but at confusing your opponent. And I found Nick Naylor is even more fascinating because we know when we read the book that he doesn't actually support the cause of his clients, and he is fully aware of faults of what he's actually trying to say. But instead, he's trying to internally justify what he's doing by necessity to pay a mortgage. And he's plainly admitting that he's just simply very good at what he's doing. And while I was following Nick Naylor, I couldn't stop thinking about all these people that probably doing absolutely despicable things for the sake of mortgage, or maybe just because they're very, very good at what they're doing. But don't be mistaken, because this book not only discusses Nick's rhetoric tactics, even though I found them absolutely fascinating, and probably I would just read this book just for this purpose. But at the same time, it uncovers underbelly of the industry in all its dark glory. And I would say that it's not only a political satire, but a corporate thriller. And a sharp plot twist happens when Nick, participating in one of the shows, received a studio call with a death threat, which is shortly followed by his kidnapping and attempted murder with application of fatal dose of nicotine patches on him. And following this event, we follow absolutely crazy roller coaster of events. And I absolutely loved the resolution of the book. And even though for me personally, when I learned and discovered what actually happened, I started raising questions about some of the events preceding to this moment. But I think it's such a minor fault of the book and probably just my personal thing. I still would highly recommend this book. The writing is very good, even though it's not flowery, but it's just very easy to follow. Characters are absolutely fascinating and very engaging to follow. And at the same time, we have this absolutely crazy twists and turns of the plot. Personally, for me, it was just an absolutely amazing combination of satire when sometimes you just can't stop smirking, but at the same time with some elements of thriller. But again, it's not only about Nick's rhetoric, and again, not only about thriller elements of this book. I loved the characters interaction. And even despite the fact that it's pretty much business for Nick, he built a few quite interesting personal connections. And the first type of connections that I would like to discuss in this video are his friends from lobby industry, Maud's quote, Merchants of Death. And Merchants of Death is a group of 3 individuals, Nick including, who represent different lobbying industry. We meet Bobby J. Bliss, who is a spokesman for safety, aka Society for Advancement of Firearms and Effective Training of Youth. And the third friend we find in this group is Polly Bailey, who is a spokeswoman for a moderation council, and she represents alcohol industry. And Merchants of Death meet on weekly basis when they go for lunch in a restaurant, and this is their personal time because they're friends and they just want to see and complain and share their tactics and discuss all the challenges that they're facing at this moment. And here we see very interesting and personal connection that Nick manages to build with these people, because they are not just lobbyists on the industries, they are actually friends and they're ready to help each other. And at the same time, sometimes they're inviting some other people from other groups to participate in their lunches, how they're saying, to promote camaraderie between the despised. There is no way I'll be able to actually just list all these groups here just because it is very difficult list for me. I'll just read it for you. We have a Society of the Humane Treatment of Carps, representing veal industry. Again, we have Friends of Dolphins, which is formerly Tuna Fishermen Association. As well, we have an American Highway Safety Association, representing triple trailer truckers. And the last one, we have a Land Enrichment Foundation, formerly a coalition for responsible disposal of radioactive waste. So here you can see how Christopher Buckley is trying to play on the lobbying industry and highlight that many of these organizations and associations are trying to hide the real purpose of their foundation behind these more socially acceptable names. And the second type of personal connection that Nick manages to build in this book actually shows the duality of his personality. Because on one hand, Nick becomes a protector and advocate for Lorna Lodge, who used to be a media representative for the tobacco industries. He used to participate in tobacco industry adverts and movies and was a heavy smoker. But in the book we see that now he is suffering from lung cancer and dying. And even though many executives in the industry were thinking of suing Lorna for the breach of contract, Nick advocated against it and asked to leave him alone. Here we see a very human connection on the part of Nick when he's still trying to protect this person, even though Lorna is playing actually against his interests. And on the other hand, Nick finds a father figure in Doig Boykin, who is a legendary chairman for the industry. He has a full control of tobacco lobby industry. But he's in his senior years and his health is declining. But he takes Nick under his wing because he sees himself in Nick, younger himself, and they build this very beautiful and fragile connection. And despite all of this disregard for humanity's interest, we see lots of personal growth in Nick, and maybe, just maybe, there is actually a chance for a new beginning for Nick. I love this book. I had such an amazing time with it. It is very fast-paced, it reads like a thriller, but at the same time it's very funny, and there is lots of duality in Nick's personality, which I really appreciated. There is a bit of racism and sexism, but I personally didn't feel that it was the view of the author, but otherwise it was just the part of the industry. As already mentioned, the writing style is very easy to follow and definitely will not be overwhelming. I personally already ordered 2 other books by the author, and I'm hoping to read them as soon as possible. And another fun fact, there is a movie based on this book. I'll just pop here on the screen, actually a fictional representation of Nick from the movie. So you can see, and I think this actor really matches the view of Nick that I created inside my head while reading this book. And I'll try to watch this movie actually as soon as possible as well. I'm sure I will love it. All in all, it's a very high recommend from me if you like thrillers and political satire. I personally don't really know many similar books, and if you know some of the books that might be similar to Thank You for Smoking, please let me know in the comments below. I will be very grateful for it because I think this book was an absolute bliss for me, and I'm very eager to try something else. But do please let me know if you read this book, if you're planning to read it, or if you have some recommendations of similar books. I'll be happy to try it. And again, thank you for watching this video, and I'll see you soon. Bye.